Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today at the New Mexico Department of Justice. Today, we have asked you here to have a conversation about the latest filing that this office has initiated in response to unprecedented cuts and disruption of essential services undertaken by the Trump administration. On Monday afternoon, we joined a coalition of 22 states who filed an action in the Rhode Island District Court seeking to have a preliminary injunction issued in response to a proposal that came from the Office of Management and Budget, which proposes to freeze nearly $7 billion in critical education funding. 45 million of those dollars would go to support essential educational efforts here in the state of New Mexico. It covers a range of programs that not only go to support our frontline educators, but some of the services that the children in our communities rely on: after school programs, summer programs, tutoring programs, English language learners. These are things that are designed to support the neediest, the hardest hit people who often don't have the time or the resources available to structure aftercare programs, for example, or after school programs. They don't have the ability, especially in rural communities, to find qualified summer school programs for their kids. And one of the things that I wanted to sort of bring to this conversation is my perspective, not as an attorney or the attorney general, but as the son of somebody who retired from the public school system. My mom worked in the Albuquerque public school system for a number of years, and I had a distinct impression in talking to her and listening to her experience in a classroom that frankly often didn't have the resources that it needed. About how committed these educators are to the needs of their kids, to the fact that oftentimes frontline educators were paying out of pocket for school supplies. They were paying out of pocket to provide the basics that their kids need. And I think a lot of times there is a lack of awareness or appreciation for the level of commitment that those educators bring to the classroom. But I also think there needs to be some perspective on the fact that these kids are looking for adults outside of their homes and in their communities who demonstrate a commitment to them, who believe in them, who think that they can achieve great things in their life. And it's in our schools and in the hands of our educators that kind of bond is eventually formed. These kinds of cuts go to the heart of that relationship and undermines, I think, a commitment that we all share, Republicans and Democrats, to the idea that working families who are in public schools need and deserve as much support as they can get, to have after-school support and summer school support, especially for kids that may be struggling, especially for kids that, frankly, we are seeking to assimilate into our society. One of the things that I noticed in the cuts is the impact that it's going to have on English language learners. And I find it ironic that this administration would issue an executive order seeking to establish English as the official language of this country, and yet at the same time cut supports for helping kids who want to learn English. They want to more fully participate in the American dream and in American society. And making these kinds of cuts will have a dramatic impact on their ability to do that. And last but not least, I saw that there was yet another conversation in my old office in the Bernalillo County District Attorney's Office yesterday about the need to focus on juvenile crime and the need for legislative action on juvenile crime. And I'm glad that members of the law enforcement community are doing that. But I think one of the things that we continue to miss is the connection that we have between kids that need more intervention early in their lives and resources to make sure that they're successful in life, that we reduce trauma, that we provide the kinds of support services that they will need to be successful, whether or not they come from a background that has been impacted by trauma or child abuse or other kinds of events and issues. And that's why I think we need to start having a broader conversation about how essential education funding like that, and like which is at the center of the lawsuit that we filed in this case, it actually undermines in the long run our ability to try and support healthy and safe communities, because the loss of that funding, think about it. If you have a child who's responding to and relying on the government to help support after school programs, when those programs go away, what happens to those kids? What happens to the kids who no longer have high quality educational support in the summer? All of that impacts their ability to succeed in the education system and makes them far more likely to end up in the criminal justice system. So there are a number of, I think, unintended or unrealized consequences that are associated with these types of cuts. And last but not least, I want to give an opportunity to frontline leaders in this space. We have folks who have been advocates in their communities that both voted for President Trump, communities that didn't. And they are here to have a conversation about what these cuts will mean for their kids, for their schools, and for the families that they work every day to try to help and lift up. And so the first person that I would like to introduce is Christy Medina. She's the superintendent of the Raton Public School District. Christy.
Good afternoon. My name is Christy Medina, and I'm the superintendent of the Raton Public Schools. I come before you today as an advocate for our children and families that I serve every day. In New Mexico, we believe that every child, no matter their zip code or background, deserves a strong start and a fair shot at success. We all want what's best for our students and our communities. New Mexico schools have depended on federal education funds for over 50 years. Dating back to the passage of the major federal education legislation, such as the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. The landmark law aimed to address educational inequalities, especially in low-income and rural areas, conditions that are very widespread in New Mexico today. The recent freeze of more than $6 billion in federal education funds will have a direct and devastating impact, not only on the students in my district, but across New Mexico, especially in rural and underserved communities, such as ours. These funds are the backbone of some of our critical programs in our schools, such as teacher training and support, mental health support, academic tutoring, summer school learning, English language learning, after-school programs, and basic classroom needs. Without them, we are forced now to make some impossible choices that affect real lives. Teachers lose resources, families lose support, and students, especially those who already face barriers, lose opportunities that they can't afford to miss right now. In New Mexico, where many students live in rural, low-income, multilingual communities, these funds are not extra. They're very essential to each and every community in New Mexico. This is not about party lines. This is about the future of our students and our kids. Delaying or denying these funds sends the message that their education is negotiable. It's about our shared responsibility to ensure that every child, no matter where they live, have every opportunity to succeed and be successful. With schools just weeks away, and some probably within the next few days, this delay funding creates some very uncertain times for our families, our educators, and it puts children at risk of falling further behind. So today, I'm calling upon decision makers at every level to act swiftly, responsibly, and in unity to ensure that our students do not become collateral damage in a political debate Their success is our shared responsibility.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Bill Rodriguez, the out-of-school time director for Santa Fe Public Schools, a position I've held for the past 5 years. I came to this position after teaching for 25 years and being a 21st Century Community Learning Center site coordinator. We serve 700 families and their children in 13 Title I elementary and K-8 schools, working with community partners to provide free, enriching, hands-on opportunities in art and technology. We are committed to helping students flourish and discover who they want to become. Without the 21st Century program, students will miss out on these critical opportunities. One parent at El Camino Real Academy stressed to me how pivotal the 21st Century program has been in her children's lives. They've learned science and engineering practices, mastered visual programming language, and acquired critical technological, creative, and academic skills. Without the program, students' academic growth could be impacted, and parents may be faced with making the difficult decision to leave their children at home alone or being watched by older siblings after school. The district did not budget the 21st Century funding to be frozen. We deeply value the services that the 21st Century Centers have offer and recognize the positive impact they have on our community. We have a team working on solutions, but without this funding, we cannot guarantee services will continue. The freeze has far-reaching impacts. Already, some among the 60 staff who support the program are asking if they should start looking for other employment opportunities, as the supplemental income from staffing 21st Century Community Learning Centers is so essential in their lives. We are on the precipice of losing something very critical to student learning in Santa Fe. My hope today is to represent the voices of families, children, and staff who need and want this program and the opportunities it affords them all. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peter McWayne. I'm the Executive Director for Santa Fe Public Schools Curriculum and Instruction. And the notification of this grant withholding on June 30th created a situation where our after-school programs are left unfunded. This notification came one day prior to when districts were expected to receive the funding. One day. Because districts had no preliminary notification of this funding freeze, there is negligible time to mitigate the impact to families, to employees, and to our children. Without 21st Century funding, districts like Santa Fe Public Schools cannot give reasonable assurance of 21st Century after-school programming for this coming school year. 21st Century after-school programs support our children in a safe and structured environment, and it accelerates learning. And just to be clear, 21st Century programming supports children who, without this funding, have nowhere else to go. The effects of this funding freeze will impact the core of our community.
My name is Ian Gates, and I'm representing the New Mexico Out of School Time Network, and I'm representing our executive director, Mai Sagbakken, who is not able to be here today. As a statewide network, we work to ensure that every child in New Mexico has access to high quality after school and summer learning, regardless of their income and their zip code. Title IV Part B funds 21st Century Community Learning Centers across our state, and it is the only federally funded program that supports before and after school programs in New Mexico. Here in New Mexico, Title IV Part B provides $10 million in federal funding supporting 127 different after-school program sites across the state. The withholding of these funds will close the doors of 127 21st Century Community Learning Centers with 9,600 students, according to PED, who will lose access to critical programs in urban, rural, and tribal communities. The impact of withholding states' funding will be devastating. Some local summer programs will have to shut down abruptly, and after-school programs slated to start this fall will not. If these funds are not released very soon, we will see more children and youth unsupervised and at risk. We will see more academic failures, more hungry children, more chronic absenteeism, higher dropout rates, and a less STEM-ready and successful workforce as our childcare crisis worsens dramatically. 87% of voters, including large majorities of Republicans, independents, and rural voters, agree that after-school programs are an absolute necessity, and nearly 4 in 5 Republicans favor greater investments in these programs. Eliminating 21st century community learning centers will have a dramatic economic impact in our state. Many families have 2 working parents, and 4 in 5 parents say that having after-school programs helps them keep their jobs and provide for their families. Losing access to these programs means that parents may be forced to work less hours. School staff may have to continue to run programs without the compensation that they deserve. Nonprofit organizations will lose income from contracts and lay off staff as they will no longer be able to provide programming, meals, and snacks after school. In this moment of crisis, we urge the Public Education Department to find funding to continue to support 21st century community learning centers. With $15 million allocated to After School and House Bill 2 this last legislative session, we know that approximately $5 million has not been allocated to programs to date in the Community Schools Bureau. These $5 million could be a lifeline for 21st century community learning centers that have been defunded. We urge the Secretary of Education to identify the additional $5 million as this crisis, if this crisis continues, to ensure that students and families have a safe and engaging place after 3 p.m. Finally, youth and after-school programs are kept safe and have less exposure to negative influences. Youth who regularly participate in after-school programs are less likely to drink, vape, or use drugs. They make better decisions, gain confidence, and have stronger social skills. Our state and our country will be much better off if we continue investing in after-school and summer learning through 21st century community learning centers. On behalf of our network, we thank you, Attorney General Torrez, for standing with New Mexico children, youth, and families.
So I want to thank these extraordinary educational leaders for joining us today to deliver, I think, greater context and perspective on the impact that these cuts are going to have across the state of New Mexico. I want to reiterate, I think, a couple of points that came through. Number one is the impact that this is going to have on working families, on families that are struggling because both parents are juggling jobs. They may not have the money and the resources available to them to find alternatives. That's going to impact our economy. And it's also going to make these families face a very difficult choice about whether or not they have to start cutting back on the amount of work that they are doing so that they can provide some supervision for their kids. But number two, I want to stress again, if we are going to take on the problem that we have in this state with abused and neglected children, if we're going to take on the challenge that we have in public safety, specifically with juvenile crime, eliminating critical after-school and summer programs for at-risk kids or for lower income families is exactly what we don't want to do. This is, from my perspective, not only a poorly conceived policy choice on the part of the administration. I think it's an unconscionable moral decision to leave these families with the choice that they didn't know they had to make until just a few weeks ago, that they were going to have to start choosing between whether or not they could work or care for their kids. I think we have an obligation collectively as a state, as a community, and frankly, as a nation, to restore this funding, to make sure working families have what they need so that they can succeed and that their kids can succeed. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you may have.
Mr. Torres, Noel Alcala with the Albuquerque Journal. You've joined a number of lawsuits with other blue states since Trump took office, and I'm curious, what is a tangible goal of this one, and can you respond to the claim that it's largely symbolic?
Well, the goal is very straightforward. We want to make sure that the funding for after-school programs and summer programs for kids in public schools and their working families that support those or need those programs continue to have access to them. I would frankly reject the idea that the lawsuits that we have been filing are symbolic. We have actually, I got a message from the head of UNMH just last night thanking us for filing a lawsuit on the reductions in funding for NIH grants and other health-related grants. That money is now available and has been restored to some of the key institutions in our state. So my goal is to do everything I can to protect the families and the working folks in this state, regardless of their party. And this is the thing that I want everyone to really understand too, because I think there is a perspective that has been built up around this. And it's unfortunate that it's only the Democratic attorneys general who are filing some of these actions. But it's natural, I think, for people to look through this through a partisan lens. Okay. But no one is going to ask the families whose kids are going to get thrown out of after school programs or summer programs if their parents voted for Donald Trump or voted for Vice President Harris. That's not the point. And it doesn't matter to me if these cuts are impacting communities that President Trump prevailed in, or communities like Santa Fe where he didn't prevail. My job is to make sure that all New Mexican kids have what they need to succeed. And that includes people who I think will be harmed by this policy, regardless of how their particular community came down in terms of who they were going to support for president. That's my obligation. I would say, and I think it was put very well when there was some conversation about the level of support, I think if you went and asked folks, even folks that supported the administration and voted for the administration, if when they cast a ballot for Donald Trump, they did so because they thought he was going to cut after school and summer care programs in rural communities, I would imagine not. I would imagine they had other issues and ideas on their mind, and they have every right and should exercise their right to vote who they think is the best person based on those issues. But this is not going to hurt elected officials. This is not going to hurt elected Democrats. This is not a partisan issue. This is about kids who will not have access in the matter of weeks to a lifeline to educational support and resources that can make the difference in their lives. And when we undertake an action like this, I want people to know that we do it on behalf of all New Mexicans.
Attorney General Torrez, this is Austin Fisher with Source New Mexico. Thanks for the time. Can you talk about where the case is at procedurally? What are the next steps in the case? And is there any possibility that the judge in the case could actually issue an injunction before the school year begins?
So the lawsuit was filed in the U.S. District Court in Rhode Island, and at the same time that the action was filed, a motion for preliminary injunction was also filed. As I understand it, based on the latest information, a hearing on the preliminary injunction has not yet been scheduled. We anticipate that will be held sometime in the next week or so. If we are able to prevail, New Mexico, as one of the 22 participating states, will benefit from that injunction, and the administration will be ordered not to cut this funding, meaning the status quo will remain in place. It will then, if it follows the same pattern that previous litigation has followed, could be appealed by the administration to the Court of Appeals and potentially up to the Supreme Court. And one of the things that I anticipate is, assuming we prevail in the preliminary injunction, that this funding may be in place for the duration of the litigation, and that could take a year or more, maybe several years, to resolve this question. So it's very early on in the process. What I am hoping to do is to address one of the issues that was raised earlier, which is we have people right now, we have teachers right now who are working in these programs. They're trying to decide if they need to go look for another job. We have parents in our state right now who are wondering if this after school program that they built their entire lives around and their schedules around, you know, finding quality help to make sure, and childcare and after school programs, that weighs on every parent's mind, right? And imagine, put yourself in the position of somebody who can't easily, because you live in a rural community or you just don't have extra money lying around. How are you going to go and find out where your child's going to be in a way that's safe, and where they're learning something? I'm trying to bring at least some reassurance to those families and to those educators within the next several weeks. But this is something that is going to impact everybody. And for maybe employers or folks who are watching this and thinking about it, and they think, well, I don't have young kids, and it may not be something that I need to worry about. Well, if you work in a business, or more importantly, if you own a business, you probably have someone who works for you, who you are relying on to show up and do that work, whose entire life has been built around the idea that their kids are going to be okay. And so I can show up and have this kind of schedule. Imagine what happens when you have 10,000 kids, nearly 10,000 kids at 127 centers across the state of New Mexico. Instantly, their parents are thrown into this state of anxiety, and they're trying to figure out what to do with their families. That is what happens when someone in DC looks at a line item like something like this and decides, well, this is a place that we can just make a cut. It is, I think, completely irresponsible to engage in policymaking in that way, especially in light of the timing. I mean, you heard from the head of curriculum here in Santa Fe, in the Santa Fe school districts, notifying the district the day before the money is meant to be distributed. How are local governments supposed to respond to that? How are local school districts supposed to react to that? There is no contingency in place, and I know the governor has talked about the possibility of convening a special session to address the impact of a number of bills, but there's no contingency built into the budgeting process right now that will enable anyone to adjust in a time frame that actually enables workers, teachers, and kids to have the resources that they need and to plan accordingly.
Julian Pottas with KOAT. Thanks, guys, for making some time for us. I did have a question for most of you guys that showed up today, but regarding Raton Public Schools, Santa Fe Public Schools, other districts across the state, what would you say your guys' plan is moving forward if something like this preliminary injunction is not able to come through as soon as possible, especially with school coming within the next few weeks to months?
Yes, so in Raton, we start school August 7th. Our teachers come back. And, we've had training planned, professional development for them. And so our team right now is taking a look at the numbers and trying to prioritize and look at the things and the programs that we're going to have to probably inevitably cut. And it's hard because all those programs have been implemented and put in place for specific reasons to support our students. And so now we take a look at either prioritizing, trying to pick the one that is most important to offer our students when they're all important, and also taking a look at the fact that we may not be able to offer any of them at all for our students and families, and cutting everything. And so that leaves, just like Santa Fe Public Schools, it leaves a hole in an area where parents and the community and students are depending on.
Santa Fe Public Schools and school districts I've worked in don't have frivolous things built into their budget that are disposable. School starts in 3 weeks. With this cut, of course, we're scrambling and trying to figure out how to support our students that are in most need. But there's no clear path forward. And currently we don't have a plan to continue to offer the services that are being cut.
Yeah, Mr. Torres, and actually for whoever wants to field this question, I know there was only like a day of notification that this money wasn't going to be released, but it has been a longstanding kind of campaign promise from the Trump administration to shrink public education, to dismantle the Department of Education. So would you have liked to have seen other state policymaking bodies, the LESC or PED, kind of step into that gap so that you were ready for funding cuts like this at the federal level?
So I think there has been some rhetoric that's been used about dismantling the Department of Education as a place where I guess the claim or the belief was there was too much bureaucracy and there was too much red tape. But there was a companion commitment that was made, as I understand it, that don't worry, the programs will stay in place. It will, the funding will not impact your communities, right? And the other piece that I think was certainly present during the last campaign and obviously present after the last campaign, and that is what working people are thinking about. And I can say from my own perspective that I think the American people, and especially people who are struggling with inflation, housing costs, transportation costs, and increasingly childcare costs, if they made a decision in the last campaign because they were thinking that the Trump administration was going to be squarely focused on their issues, I don't think they had this kind of cut in mind, which is why this is one of the issues, frankly. There are certainly other issues that the administration has targeted that clearly, you can identify a clear partisan division within which direction folks in the country think that, we should go as a country. Funding after school programs and summer programs for rural communities and working families really isn't one of those. At least not that I can recall. I have seen a lot. I've been, participated in a lot of political conversations. I really haven't seen even the president stand up and say, you know what? I want you to return me to office because I'm going to get those the funding cuts for after school programs and summer programs. There was a lot of focus on people who he considered to be working in these areas that were bureaucratic in nature, or there was too much waste, or those other issues. But I don't remember any pledge to shut down programs for these kids, because I don't think there's a broad constituency for that kind of commitment in this, even in this very divided political world. Kids and protecting kids and helping kids is still, thankfully, a place where we still find a lot of bipartisan support. Now, there's always room to improve programs, improve efficiency. Having worked in the government, I will never be the one to argue that every dollar spent is the most efficient way to use that dollar. But what that, I think, requires is an approach that focuses on what programs are delivering high performing and high quality services to people, which are not, and how can you scale up those services rather than just trying to throw that entire process out. And I think, frankly, there's broad consensus in the country about let's just make things work and let's start by helping the people who need help the most. And those are working Americans who are clearly struggling financially and with other issues and needs. Why would we add this to the long list of things that they're worried about right now? I bet you there are a lot of folks in this country, not just here in New Mexico, who, they're getting ready. I'm a parent. I'm getting ready for the school year. I'm more than ready in many respects, for the school year to start again. But we plan our lives starting with what? Our kids. All of us, we start with, well, what are we going to do with our kids? And if you think, oh, it's okay, they're in this program, they've got great teachers, they've got great support, they're going to be fed, they're going to get quality instruction, then you can start thinking about the rest of your life. And what we have done is taken thousands of families in this state and millions of families across the country, and what they thought they understood is gone out the window. And that's not what people want or support.
Dominic Brown, KRQE. Today we talked a lot about the issues that might be faced for the families at home. So for the families at home that will be watching this,
Yeah.
do you have a direct message for anything they can do to get involved? Maybe something a way that they can not lose hope in this time as it gets closer to the school season coming?
Well, they obviously need to pay close attention, not only to the work that we're doing to try and safeguard the funding, but to follow up on the question that we just had, what kind of contingency plans can we build in place? They need to engage with their school district. They need to engage with state representatives, but they also, quite frankly, need to let elected officials, not just at the local level, but at the national level, let them know that this is not something that they support. I don't think it really means a lot, quite frankly, for someone in my position to say, this is something that I am opposed to. I have my own reasons for opposing it. I have my own background, my connection to law enforcement and public safety, my understanding and experience from seeing my mom and some of her challenges. But let's put all that aside, because I'm an elected official, and because I'm an elected official, I have a D next to my name. And because I have a D next to my name, there are certain folks who are going to say, well, I'm not going to listen to that. What I need are people who supported the president, who voted for the president, who do not agree with this, to say, this matters to us. This isn't what we voted for. This is what we want, and it's going to impact us, because that matters. The willingness of people to stand up and say something like this in this moment is what is needed. And I don't mean by elected officials. I just mean by everyday folks. The voice of everyday people in communities around the state who think this is bad for their community, even and especially if they voted for the president. They need to say, I would urge them to say something and speak out, because what that does is it pulls it from this partisan space that we are increasingly in and puts it in the context of, I'm just trying to live my life, right? I'm just trying to plan work. I'm just trying to figure out how to support my kids. I voted, if someone voted for the president, I would like someone who supported him to say that, because I think it really matters to them at ground level. And that's the last thing that I would like to close on, is this isn't just about abstract policy or budgetary debates or budget fights. These issues have real world consequences for people, and the real world consequences, they don't just land on one party or another. They don't just land in urban communities, rural communities. They impact everybody. And if we collectively believe that this is not something that is in the best interests of our kids and our families, then we have an obligation to speak up and say something, even if it's in small conversations, even if it's to sort of let their friends and neighbors and local elected officials know that this isn't right, and we're willing to fight over it. So we appreciate your time and attention to this, and stay tuned, because we will certainly have a lot more when it comes to the actions of this department and the fight we're engaged in. So thank you very much.